Chào mừng quý phụ huynh và các bạn học viên đã tới webinar số 5 của Học viện Mỹ thuật Artpink. Chuỗi webinar số 5 này được xây dựng bởi một chuỗi những webinar được xây dựng bởi những partnership của Artpink đối với những các trường đại học từ các chuyên ngành khác nhau. Thì theo đúng định kỳ thì buổi hôm nay chúng ta sẽ bắt đầu tới với buổi webinar tìm hiểu về chuyên ngành Illustration minh họa được diễn ra giữa Artpink và đơn vị trường UCA với sự góp mặt của giáo sư THổm một chút vắn tắt về tiểu sử và thông tin của ông THổm. Thì hiện tại ông THổm là đại diện và giám đốc chuyên ngành của đối với hệ cử nhân và hệ thạc sĩ tại chuyên ngành Illustration tại trường UCA. Và với hơn 13 năm kinh nghiệm thì ông THổm đã có kinh nghiệm làm việc với rất là nhiều những trường đại học trên toàn lãnh thổ Anh, và bên ngoài là một người thầy và người giảng viên ra thì THổm còn là một người họa sĩ chuyên nghiệp và làm việc với rất là nhiều lĩnh vực khác nhau, từ 2D artwork cho đến 3D artwork. Thì ông THổm thì có những cái kinh nghiệm thực tiễn khá là dày dặn. Thì trong chương trình ngày hôm nay, Artpink mong rằng là với sự kết nối của Artpink và UCA thì có thể cho quý vị được tiếp xúc trực tiếp với những người thực hành và đang lao động nghệ thuật chuyên nghiệp tại trường UCA để có thể có một cái bức tranh tổng quan về cái chuyên ngành Illustration mà có thể là quý học viên và phụ huynh đang quan tâm tới trong kỳ tương lai, và cũng như có thể cân nhắc là UCA là một điểm rơi trong kỳ tương lai khi mình chọn lựa đi du học. Và trong buổi webinar ngày hôm nay thì chúng ta sẽ có hai phần chính. Phần đầu tiên là sự chia sẻ của ông THổm về chuyên ngành Illustration tại trường UCA và những đặc điểm. Chào mừng quý phụ huynh và các bạn học viên đã tới webinar số 5 của Học viện Mỹ thuật Artpink. Chuỗi webinar số 5 này được xây dựng bởi một chuỗi những webinar được xây dựng bởi những partnership của Artpink đối với những các trường đại học từ các chuyên ngành khác nhau. Thì theo đúng định kỳ thì buổi hôm nay chúng ta sẽ bắt đầu tới với buổi webinar tìm hiểu về chuyên ngành Illustration minh họa được diễn ra giữa Artpink và đơn vị trường UCA với sự góp mặt của giáo sư THổm. Một chút vắn tắt về tiểu sử và thông tin của ông THổm. Thì hiện tại ông THổm là đại diện và giám đốc chuyên ngành của đối với hệ cử nhân và hệ thạc sĩ tại chuyên ngành Illustration tại trường UCA. Và với hơn 13 năm kinh nghiệm thì ông THổm đã có kinh nghiệm làm việc với rất là nhiều những trường đại học trên toàn lãnh thổ Anh, và bên ngoài là một người thầy và người giảng viên ra thì THổm còn là một người họa sĩ chuyên nghiệp và làm việc với rất là nhiều lĩnh vực khác nhau, từ 2D artwork cho đến 3D artwork. Thì ông THổm thì có những cái kinh nghiệm thực tiễn khá là dày dặn. Thì trong chương trình ngày hôm nay, Artpink mong rằng là với sự kết nối của Artpink và UCA thì có thể cho quý vị được tiếp xúc trực tiếp với những người thực hành và đang lao động nghệ thuật chuyên nghiệp tại trường UCA để có thể có một cái bức tranh tổng quan về cái chuyên ngành Illustration mà có thể là quý học viên và phụ huynh đang quan tâm tới trong kỳ tương lai, và cũng như có thể cân nhắc là UCA là một điểm rơi trong kỳ tương lai khi mình chọn lựa đi du học. Và trong buổi webinar ngày hôm nay thì chúng ta sẽ có hai phần chính. Phần đầu tiên là sự chia sẻ của ông THổm về chuyên ngành Illustration tại trường UCA và những đặc điểm.
I want to give value to people that are coming in, and I want them to be excited and to get what they need. In terms of the global position of illustrators not only work freelance, they enter competitions, they kind of bid for work, they're very competitive, but they're also very aware that you don't get everything you want, and hard work, perseverance, developing a skin like a rhinoceros is really, 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 really important. So that's something that we breed into our students, our illustrators, from day one. Next slide, please. So this is just some images to show you some of the work that's been selected. So N. Mortimer, Nika. So this is just some of the work that got selected for the prizes that we showed you earlier. But you know, that, you can look at that another time, I suggest. But some really lovely individual work, and you'll see that all the work selected has its own visual voice, which goes down so we don't have a house style. Next slide, please. So what Farnham offers is a campus experience, a diverse range of expertise across courses. So everybody you interact with is a professional in their field, and you may be lucky enough to work with glass, silversmithing, blacksmithing, 3D ceramics, digital media. Everybody you work with knows their profession, their skills. Kind of a huge variety of specialist resources. I've just mentioned them. Community is important in what we do at UCA, and I know it's important in the courses that I run. You feel like you're part of something. We want you to feel like you're part of something. We have a global community, which I'm very proud of, and it's an exciting global community. Friendly and caring and committed staff, as you can see. I'm friendly, I care, I'm committed. Unbelievably ambitious students. They want to be the best in the world, and we help them to be the best in the world. Hugely successful alumni, so people that have come and studied with us and have gone off to do amazing things. And then a community of innovators. We breed innovation throughout the courses at UCA, but also in terms of the subject, illustration, innovation is really important. We are now faced with AI and computer-generated illustration that is taking the part of taking our roles. So we are having to diversify, and we are now re-examining our relationship with materials, with processes, with combinations that computers probably can't do. It's all right, no, that's perfect timing for the next slide. These are some of the staff that we have currently. They're all established, they've all been with us for a while, which means that it's a good course because people have been there a long time. But we have younger staff who are our sessional staff that come in on a year, kind of 1 to 2 year cycle to do workshops, different types of teaching, but we refresh that quite a lot. So we don't always have the same sessional staff. So we bring different people in with different expertise. And that's really important. Next slide, please. So some of the skills that you will learn, and storytelling, visual and textual. We teach you how to draw or develop your drawing, 2D and 3D, moving image, documentary, design, creative problem solving, which is really, really popular in business at the moment and has been actually for a long time. Interactive design, interactivity, and digital in its broadest form. So we're looking at where illustration is in terms of audience interaction, branding, digital. So we look at using everything from Creative Suite to Cinema 4D to Blender to augmented reality to virtual reality. So we're also looking at the new experiences of illustration rather than it just being on a page. So we're blowing apart the ideas of what illustration can be and what its role is within the visual communication sector. Next slide, please. This is just some of the stuff we have, which is pretty standard. We have a Riso printer, which if you've never used is great fun, and that's free to use. Adobe Creative Suite, Dragon Frame, we have textiles and sewing machines, we have photography, we have ceramics. We have everything that every course that it will talk to you guys has. What we do, however, do really well is we get you a really high level of proficiency and indeed mastering any skill that you kind of engage with. So if you're interested in doing textiles and sewing as an illustrator, we will make sure you're the best you can be by the time you leave us, because you'll need that dexterity and that skill and that craft when you go into industry. It's really important. It can't just, you know, it has to be ready for somebody to invest in financially, conceptually, in terms of ideology, whatever, but it has to be at the best it can be, and we get you ready for that. Next slide, please. So studio spaces, next slide. Just to quickly go through, I won't talk too much. These are some of the things we have. So workshops, printmaking, big drawing rooms, painting rooms, plaster rooms. Next one, please. These are some of our visiting speakers. Slides have got a bit mixed up, so next one. So these are people that have come in. Joey Yu's really famous. Robert Say Hang is a former alumni of ours. Lizzie Stewart has done loads and loads of great stuff. So you get to meet these kinds of people. Stephen Fowler in year 1 and 2, and year 3 is much more about kind of industry or research and where you want to go with it. Next slide, please. There's so this is just a workshop by Margot Carpentier. So this is a workshop just around drawing, but also community building. Next one, please. Again, Charlotte Ager, looking at what drawing can be. So really fast experimental drawing in year 1 to get you thinking about mark making, weight of mark, and what that communicates to your audience. Next slide, please. Collaborations. So we get people in to do big collaborations, and students get selected to go off and then do things with these organizations. So this was Peep Show that came in and did a collaboration around spaces and play. Next one, please. Studio culture. So I mentioned that earlier. Community is the key to our success. Next slide, please. So we do, as well as teaching, we do make sure that our students feel like they're part of something. So we do kind of things like coffee mornings where we do drawing, and you can bring tea and cakes and coffee, and you meet other people from the course, because we believe that's really important. If you're coming from Vietnam, it might be your first time away from home. You will be with students from the UK, from Europe, from South, East and Central Asia, from North and South America, everywhere. So we bring people together and we make sure that you can talk to people and have different experiences and conversations. Next slide, please. So we do that. This is one of our tutors is from the north of Ireland, or Northern Ireland, and he loves these crisps. So every year he buys everybody a bag of crisps because that's what he wants to do. And it's what he does for the first day for every group, so he can introduce who he is. And it's fun, and we like fun. And I know that's a weird thing for a tutor or a program director to say, but if you're not enjoying what you're doing, you won't learn and you won't be successful. You have to enjoy it, especially in what we do. There are going to be challenges, there are going to be things you don't like doing, but on the whole, that's part of the enjoyment, the challenge, getting up and going, I'm going to be the best I can be. Next slide, please. Humor and fun, as I say, we are recording screams. Please don't call the police. We like laughter. It's important. We like people to have fun. As I keep saying, you know, if it's arduous and it's stressful and you're not enjoying it, you're not getting the best out of it. So we take you on that journey of loving and mastering the craft of illustration. Next one, please. Organize shops on campus. So students sell work to staff. Most students make about £200 to £300 each when they do these things. And it's great to understand that you can sell what you do. It doesn't just have to be commissioned by somebody else. There's value to what you do. And that's a nice bit of pocket money as well for students. Next one, please. But it also teaches you key skills around teamwork, around budgeting, around basically creating a business, which students then go off and take around the world. Next slide, please. So delivery, how we deliver. This is really important. So we deliver content, ideas, creative thinking, visual communication, and outcomes. That is the art and design journey, or the illustration journey, that we put in place. We use one-to-one tutorials. So we will talk to students on a one-to-one level. We do seminars. We do workshops, lectures, trips and visits, live briefs, and events. One of the things that we are particularly good at here at Farnham is we do what I call waiting on tables teaching. So students will be given a project and they might be seen 6 or 7 times in a day, but only for 5 minutes each time. And it'll be very quick feedback. And we do that because it's like being a record producer. We want to be involved in the moment. We don't like teaching the process where we give the student the brief, the student comes back 2 weeks later and then gets feedback, and then we move on to the next thing. I believe, as an artist, illustrator, maker, that teaching has to be consistent and concurrent throughout the time that we are together, and that every conversation should help the student progress to the next part of their development. And that for me is really, really important. Again, I'm going to go back to the statement I said earlier. This is the type of teaching that if my children, two boys, wanted to go to university to study the arts, this is how I would want them to be taught. They don't want to do art, they want to do history and sport. Go figure. But that's life. So this is the model that I've put in place that I think and I know works. I was lucky enough to go to a very prestigious art school in London, and this is the process that we had. And that was on my master's, so I'm bringing it to undergraduate and MA at Farnham. Next slide, please. These are just kind of factual things mainly for parents, I guess, and a little bit for students, but you get a minimum of 2 days that are face-to-face, 10 till 4. So face-to-face means you're in there, you're working. Open access to studios Monday to Friday, 9 till 7, and skills workshops on non-studio days for all year groups. So what that means is if you're in year 1, you are taught on a Tuesday and a Friday and Thursday for theory. On the other days, we put in workshops, printmaking, digital, glass, ceramics. So we try and fill your week as much as possible so that you're constantly learning things and you're constantly experiencing things. We don't want you sat in your rooms, because what's the point in that? We want you out, we want you doing things, we want you learning things. We want you to go and experience London, the south coast of England, Farnham. We want you to really embrace the culture, the identity of what we do, and to then take it and celebrate it and use it wherever you go in your life after that. So next slide, please. What happens on each year? So next slide. So if you're coming to do an integrated foundation year or the international foundation year, this is if you're not sure about where you want to go, whether it's graphics or illustration, this is an option we have. So we've called it's integrated and integrated stroke international integrated foundation. So you will be able to work within graphics and illustration for a year, and then you can make a choice the next year where you want to go. And that will be done not only with your tutor, but people like me, program directors, will come down and do portfolio reviews, do a few sessions with you to see what your skill set is and where we think you're best placed. And we do it through negotiation. So we might say, we think you should do this, but you might say, no, absolutely, I want to do that. And having the passion can be equal to having the skill. We can learn skills, but passion is the key thing. Next slide, please.
Excuse me, Tom.
Yeah.
This part is very exciting because a lot of parents and students consider the foundation years. And could you tell me a little bit more detail about the foundation years in UCA? What's the difference between the other programs compared to some university around the locations? Could you tell us? Yeah,
of course, absolutely. So our integrated foundations are based upon about 70 years worth of foundation teaching knowledge. So UCA has had in its various different guises. It was Kent, Epsom College. Came together to make a big university. There's lots of experience with foundation. So with foundation, what you can do with that at Farnham is you really kind of start to develop the core skills, but also experiment. British art education is all about experimentation in the early stages. We want you trying methods, materials, processes, concepts that you've never thought of. And we want you to kind of really test the boundaries and play. And we don't mind, and I know this is going to be an odd thing to say, we don't mind if you failed in your foundation year in terms of the work being bad. Obviously, you have to pass the units, but we don't want you to play it safe. You cannot be anything in art and design if you play it safe. You have to take risks. And the foundation gets you ready for that. It also supports with communication and language skills for international students. So students on an international foundation will get support for English communication and academic writing for English, which I know there's variations, which is a great skill to have. So, you know, a lot of what we do is oral. We do a lot of talking. We kind of start that a lot in foundation. You know, we want students communicating. But I think the uniqueness of what we do is we have a school of communication foundation. So it's just illustration and graphic students put together to work across the two fields, working out where they want to go. And that's a uniqueness. So you do that very early on. You do that kind of around when you first come in, and then you start to specialize after Christmas.
Yeah. So
it's a really fun, exciting year. And we also, as I say, help with language development. We help with academic writing development for study in the UK. And we kind of get you used to the university experience and the way that art school in the UK works. So it's very art school and art departments in the UK and arts universities are very concept driven. It's all about ideas and then the manifestation of that into practice. I know from international students, and I have to admit here, I've not taught any Vietnamese students. I wish I had, but I haven't. It's more about the technical acquisition first. It's about mastering the skill. In the UK, it's about having an amazing idea and an amazing skill to communicate it, because ultimately that's what makes it unique. Does that answer the question?
Yes, that's very helpful, because in Artpink and to the Vietnamese students general, they almost focus on the technical, but they forget how to build up the methodology is in creative. And you just write academic writings and how to make smart questions to get the knowledge. It's more important when they study abroad, especially in UK. And I'm happy that you can combine the concentrate community, because the ones who want to study graphic only want to compare to the ones who study in illustrations, so they can meet and you can share the knowledge and share the artwork and have the view and the big picture will be clear. So it's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
You're very welcome. Next slide. That's not the end of the talk, everybody. There's a bit more to go, so don't worry. Year one, it's the building blocks. So we look at skills, approaches, shaping your future community, live projects, group projects. And as I said earlier, you're a professional from day one. You're an illustrator from day one. So I'm not going to talk about all the next slides individually. We'll just go through the work, and I might stop at one or two key pieces, but you'll get a flavor of some of the work that the students do. So first slide, please. So workshops around narrative. So how to tell a story visually. Next slide, please. And sequencing. Saying, just to prove that they're actually doing things, all in masks. But you can see from the table, there's a rich diversity of students. We're not a monoculture. We have I think in this year, which is the second year, we're about to go into the third year, there's 15 different nationalities. So that's really important for us. I love that. Next slide, please. Painting. We teach you how to paint for illustration using gouache, watercolor, but it's all about the ideas. So this was about a project kind of about loneliness and absence. And, you know, it was about taking out key elements and then using paint to suggest that something's breaking apart and disappearing. Next one, please. This was just kind of a funny little project about a story about a space person who picked up a lantern and then went home, but very flat, tiny painting. Next one, please. Drawing, so using watercolor pencils. You'll notice there's a lot of analog work in year one, and this is the best work and the most resolved work, but this was a color workshop, how to use coloring pencils effectively, and how to use color combinations in order to communicate. So communicate this idea of this person around kind of the 1960s UK. It was a student's grandmother, and kind of, he was trying to imagine what she looked like. So the tones are sepia, and it's this idea that what we put on a page creates meaning and context for an audience. Next one, please. Storytelling. This was a little project called Fanga, which was Farnham manga. So we made a manga comic about Farnham, which wasn't very exciting, but this was quite fascinating, and this was just done in that style by a Russian student, actually, who makes beautiful work. She's very, very skillful. But yeah, next slide, please. Some digital drawing using Photoshop. So kind of those skills. And this was about a workshop around turning friends into characters. So this student from China, I think, yes, it was, turned two of her friends into some fantasy birds because of the way that they walked and dressed. Next one, please. I don't think this plays, unfortunately, but this was an animation about a cat. So this student followed a cat around Farnham and made a whole animation about it, which was quite exciting. Next slide, please. This, unfortunately, again, doesn't play, but this is a project where students had to reimagine their grandparents' or aunties and uncles' first house, and they made it out of cardboard, and then they superimposed augmented reality on top. What I will do is I'll send the presentation on again, and maybe you could share that at a later date as a video. So if you go to the next slide, it's the same sort of thing, really. So that's the augmented reality. So the clouds and the tree and the person are what you see through your phone. And it's a target-based augmented reality, which means that the object is scanned by your camera, and then you get to kind of interact with these key assets moving and analog. So it's taking two technologies, one quite old, one contemporary, putting them together to make something new for your audience. Next one, please. It's the same thing, the same kind of context. Next one, please. Digital drawing, looking at the Wild West and the West of America as it is in the 21st century, but kind of bringing in some early references from cowboy films and Westerns. Next one, please.
Tom, I have the questions. Many students, they just wondering how percentage about the materials when they can combine the analog paintings or digital paintings. Is that important to UCA that student can share about the digital paintings or the artwork, or to just combine about the hand paintings or hand drawings, or include three different materials?
I think, yes, for a student that's applying, showing a breadth of material exploration for me is really important. So understanding what the value of a pencil is in comparison to the value of a digital drawing, to the value of a sculpture, to the value of an animation. They all do different things. And I think it's important that students start to explore that.
Yeah.
I am a big fan, as I said at the beginning of the talk about AI, about combining materials to make something new. Ultimately, our responsibilities as illustrators is to engage an audience and to get an audience kind of excited about what we do. And more often than not, the tactile, the stuff that we can feel, like a glass, is exciting. Digital is great, but it kind of places the work in a specific place. And now we are fighting with something that can do it for free or minimal amount of money with AI and make it almost equal to what we can do. Yeah, there's some issues around shadows and stuff, but most people that commission illustration don't even notice that. We notice it because we're skilled, but they don't notice it. So we have to think about where our role is and how we use materials and processes and techniques to basically safeguard our love of the field and what we're interested in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense.
Yeah. Does that answer your question though?
Yeah, this is not
all
the questions, but the questions for all the students, because nowadays they prefer to use the digital paintings. They have the iPads, they have the Apple Pencils, and they are very lazy to have some, you know, hand drawing, hand paintings.
Yeah. Well, I think my answer to that would be, it's like cooking. I'm going to say it's like cooking.
Yeah.
When you're chopping vegetables, okay, you get a consistency for chopping vegetables, and you get to understand the size that you like and the weight. If you put everything into a blender and just press a button, you don't really understand it. You can't really understand what's good, what's bad, and you don't have that kind of affection and affinity with it. But when you see real people cook, like, you know, I was talking about this earlier, but my son's been kind of getting lessons from a Vietnamese friend, and she's been teaching how to do certain food. She will not let him use a blender. Everything has to be chopped. Okay. And for me, that's the equivalent. It's about understanding the materials and what they're capable of. Yes, digital is important. I am a digital artist. This is the hilarious thing. I work in animation. I work in augmented reality. I love it. But every day I get up and I draw. Every day I paint, even if it's for 5 or 10 minutes, because I know that skill set is the most important skill set. And I'm 44 in August, and I'm still doing it, and I'm still practicing, and I'm still making mistakes. But that's important. But yes, I'm going to say something else here, and I'm sure most of the students will switch off when I say this, but I'm going to say it because I think it's the right thing to say. Procreate is amazing, great fun. I use it, but I do not make work for clients in Procreate. I use Creative Cloud or Blender. It's really important that we distinguish what we enjoy between what is important in the industry. And I think that's a big thing. So if anyone is really, really, really upset about that, I sincerely apologize, but I'm doing it because it's the right thing to say. If anybody sits here and tells you Procreate, that's what we use to teach, that's not the right place to go, because they're not giving you the skills. And I think that's really important.
Thank you, Tom.
I see some questions. I don't mind answering questions. Are they? There's some in English, so I can answer those.
Don't worry. Our admin staff will, you know, collect the questions and send you after the first part. And we
that's fine. Yeah, we'll do that. Okay, good. I was getting excited. I saw some really good questions. Okay, we'll rattle through these bits because I know it's your weekend. So again, this actually is the perfect example. All of these textures in this piece of work were hand rendered, scanned into Photoshop, and then put together like a digital collage. And that's why this is a successful piece of work. And then it's been painted over digitally. So you've got a combination of real and digital. Next slide, please. Text, we teach you how to use text and type, but we teach you to understand that text and type as an illustrative form. So it's an extension of your drawing. It's not type in the way that graphic designers use it. It's drawing, but drawing with letter forms. Next one, please. If you've all got your mobile phones, you can now scan, he says, hoping, you can scan the QR code. I'm going to try it because it might not work and it'd be really embarrassing. Does it work anymore? Oh yeah, it does. So if you click on that, that links to an animation. It does work, but it's not working for me, but it just did work.
Yeah, it's working for me.
Excellent. So that animation was done in Illustrator, and this was looking at how you take a book and put in an interactive element to engage young children or an audience in a different way. And it's a very simple animation, but it's just about changing the sensory experience of reading so that people can have a kind of a slightly more engaging, thoughtful, fun at times, you know, kind of experience, because not everyone likes to read. Bizarrely enough, I love to read, but there you go. Next slide, please.
Yes, here you are, Tom.
Year 2, we take what you've learned in year 1 and we build on it. We test your technical limits. We spot opportunities for you to develop your work. We help you build skills that you're interested in. We kind of, you know, weave your choices together, and there is the potential for a study abroad / work placement unit, depending on which way you go, whether you've gone for the professional practice year, or whether you've gone for the straight, like just a simple BA or integrated foundation year. There's lots of combinations that you can do. I think what I would say is international students, the kind of study abroad's great, the work placement's great, but I think the students that have been the happiest in the last year or so have been ones that have kind of just afforded themselves the time to do illustration. But that's not to say, everyone's unique. It's just been that the last 2-year groups going through, none of our international students have taken up those kinds of things. They've done other things instead, like just concentrating on their work or going on great holidays around the UK and Europe. So they do, everyone does different things. So next slide, but there are combinations. Next slide. So in year 2, you do exhibitions. We get you kind of working as teams. We want you to question what illustration is. So this was an exhibition. If you go to the next slide, students did fundraising for it. They did on-site exhibitions. They did workshops. They held markets. They got really involved in trying to engage a big audience in illustration. They went out to Farnham, did some workshops with the local community. So they got to speak to other people outside of art and design as well, which is really important. Next slide, please. You get to work on work that interests you. So this, kind of concerns that you're interested in, that you want to talk about as a practitioner. Everything from how you're feeling to what annoys you and what you celebrate in the world around you. And you can have your own point of view. There's nothing right or wrong, as long as it's not offensive, demeaning to others. You can do anything. We will question it. We will ask you why, because that's what we are there to do. But we support every individual voice. Next slide, please. Then work, the piece on the left of the screen was about women's rights to vote, and looking at the historical context of that within the UK. The piece on the right, I just put into the slideshow because it makes me laugh and it's a bit creepy. And at this point, I think it's good to have a funny, creepy piece of work to scare everybody, because, that's important in the world. This is actually a 3D piece, and it was around fear. And I think it was a student who was making work on their Mexican ancestry, who actually their family moved to Spain, and she was looking at Mexico and the Day of the Dead and all of that stuff. Next one, please. You might then start to go into books, comic books, sequence narrative, but the work becomes much more refined, and the content and the context becomes much more complicated and much more sophisticated than year 1. Next one, please. This is an animation, but I'll send this to you so you can kind of have the animations again. So we'll go to the next slide. Drawing. Drawing still is a big thing right across year 1 and 2. And students are encouraged to do it every day, like I do. And it can be the beginning, the middle, or the end of a project. So this was a documentary project about Farnham and the small things that are overlooked. And this is where the students really start to develop their style in terms of drawing and a uniqueness, which is really beautiful, and a real sensitivity with line and mark, and materials. Next one, please. Branding. We teach you how to brand and promote yourself as an illustrator. Not only is that good in terms of illustration, but some of our students have gone on to do art direction, branding, brand management, marketing, in various big corporations around the world because of this skill set. So illustrators are particularly good at getting work in different places, as well as being illustrators. Next one, please. Year 3, you develop your visual voice. We build a portfolio with you, gain global perspectives, develop graduate resilience. And what that means is we basically teach you how to be strong, how to develop a skin like a rhinoceros, is what I say, so that when the rejection comes, you don't care, because you know how good you are, and you'll just keep going until people, see you. Bravery and professionalism. You've got to be brave. You've got to go for things. Criticality, understanding what doesn't work for different audiences, and where you're going to place yourself in industry. Showtime, an exhibition. Some students join us as in year 3 as a studio practice year or a top-up year. So if you've got any students that are currently in year 2 of a degree, we have partner universities where you can join us for your 3rd year, if you so wish. Next slide, please. Live briefs, next one. So we work with industry. So next slide, please. You probably won't know any of these, so forgive me. It's very Eurocentric, but I'm going to tell you what they are. So Grand Matter are an illustration agency based in London and New York. So they come in and do portfolio reviews with students, and they're currently looking at 3 of our 3rd years as potential students to be signed. Caper Illustration work across London and Shanghai, and they come in and do kind of portfolio reviews as well. So this idea that you literally put your portfolio in front of an agent, a person that commissions illustration, and they give you feedback. We are one of a handful of universities that do it, and I think it's really important. Then we've worked with Bush Hotel, Netflix. I think you might have heard of Netflix. Have you all heard of Netflix? So we did a day's thing with Netflix, a musician who's kind of on the up in the UK, hospital trusts. So we do some kind of collaborative stuff with communities and organizations. We think that's important. Christmas card and birthday card company, and then Zizzy Restaurant, which I talked about earlier. They are a big kind of national chain with I think about 150 restaurants, and two of our students were selected for the Farnham competition to redesign parts of it and do murals, and they got paid. So that was really exciting. Next slide, please. If you go to the next slide. So this is just a live brief that was set by the Zizzy's creative team. Next slide. Oh, so this was one of the murals by one of our 3rd years who did this alongside her final major project and another unit. So our students, you know, they will kind of respond to things in the moment, and they work very hard. And this student handed her work in very, very early, did the mural, and looks set to achieve a very, very, very good grade. She was very, very good student. And this is a nice playful piece based on Farnham Castle and characters and flora and fauna around Farnham. Next one, please. So this was actually an MA student who did a design. This design's been tweaked slightly, but this student also got selected. So we had 2 students. They were only going to select 1, but they thought the work was so good that they whittled it down to 2. We've got about 230 students in illustration across undergraduate and MA. 180 students applied for this opportunity. So 2 people were selected. So we like, you know, it's real world, which is the best thing. Next one, please. Some work. Yeah, next. So documentary. Student went onto the South Bank and did a whole kind of documentary project. Went onto Underground and subsequently got some work with London Underground doing work for their publications, just because someone had seen it and thought, this is brilliant, let's use it. Next one, please. This is a funny project. This is all about love. So this is the 3rd year, current 3rd year, and this idea that you can make your own partner. So it's quite funny. You know, humor. I think humor is really important in the world. So, you know, but she's using her illustrative skills to communicate this idea of commodity and love being a commodity. Next one, please. This is a really beautiful piece, and this was about the pandemic, and it's a really lovely, sensitive, clever piece of work by one of our international students, and skillfully done in Illustrator. So if you've used Illustrator, you'll know how hard that is to do. Next one, please. Students that go into games and concepts. So this student's is a Chinese student, and he started illustration but actually wants to go into games and concept, and has just got a place on a master's degree to do concept art, which he's very excited about. So next one, please. This is a current student, and this is all about burlesque dancing, and looking at contemporary and historical forms of illustration. So from like the 1900s, kind of Paris, through to contemporary imagery associated with this type of movement. So it's almost like a historical record, and quite beautiful, quite playful, great use of typography. This student's just been accepted into one of the major London universities for a master's in graphic design. So although an illustrator, kind of became interested in graphics a bit later on. Next one, please. 3D, so making 3D, photographing it, still illustration. So this is about subliminal spaces. Next one, please. This student has made a comic all about herself, which has been picked up by a couple of publishers and done a short print run. And this is beautiful. And it's all about her, and she's a very funny person. It's all about her everyday life, and this kind of tragic heroine. Next one, please. Students come in wanting to do something. So the student was really interested in manga, but we started to take the student away from that, and maybe look at more fantasy. So started then making kind of work around Martians and aliens, and still using their unbelievably beautiful drawing skills. So this is all pencil, which I think is stunning. Next one, please. This student created a book, and this book went to different book kind of markets and fairs, and both this one and then the next slide as well, please. Both got picked up at publishers' fairs and had short to medium print runs of about, I think it was about 10,000 each. So again, students were making money, getting work published. Next one, please. This student became quite interested in information and politics, and then actually became an illustrator within a local council, and then has now gone on to work for for the UK Council, Arts Council, things like that as well. So doing some really good stuff as an illustrator. Next one, please. But you might be interested in making projects that are personal to you. So this was again about the pandemic, and just satire, and just observing the world. And this work is personal, but could equally be editorial work as well. Next one. This is a really lovely project. So this was a student whose father passed away about a year into the course. He was a carpenter, so made furniture and things. His grandfather was a carpenter. His great-grandfather was a carpenter. So she looked at the history of her family, and this is a recreation of his study as it is, because they've not changed it. And it is all about loss. But she used a very beautiful technique of making all these kind of marks on materials, on bits of paper, and then cutting it all up to make these objects. And the photograph becomes the illustration. And we see a lot of this in the UK in terms of illustration. There's a big market for making work that is textural, but looks real, but isn't real. So that kind of idea that, you know, you're making this beautiful stuff, and AI cannot do that yet. Yeah. Yet. Next. Hello world. Next one, please. So illustration graduate shop, international students, home students, everybody sells their work, makes a lot of money. It's a nice end to the year. Not enough to get a plane fare home, I'm afraid, but maybe enough money to go out and have some beers and some nice food, or go maybe up to Scotland or to Paris for a weekend or something. Next slide, please.
Party.
Sorry?
Yeah, no, I just talking about the grad shops, make some money for paying for the party.
Yeah, it's important. It's important. So we have grad shows, we have industry days, we have exhibitions, we have book fairs on site, and we take students to them as well, and we showcase work. Next one, please. You have a degree show in Farnham, which is wonderful. It's a nice celebration, and we show the work alongside graphic design, and it's a nice celebration of the course of your time with us. and all courses do this, but it also gets you ready for the idea of being in a marketplace. So what we do in the course replicates what's done in the real world. So illustrators have lots of fairs, conferences where they go, and agents, publishers, designers, companies go and look at what you do, and then you start talking to them and they buy into that. So we get you ready with that skill set. Next one, please. That's just another shot. Next one. That's an older show that we had before the pandemic. So just in our studios. Next one, please. We have something called New Designers, where we take students, the best of the students' work. So we select 15 students from 480 students, because we do it with graphics as well, to take to London, and we showcase the best 15 students from the School of Communication, which is graphics and illustration and journalism at the moment. Next one, please. If you scan this, you will be linked to our Instagram. See, interactivity, I talk about it all the time, but look, you're all getting your phones out. That's exciting. Although you're probably scanning my face. So that will link to our Instagram account. And that shows you what we do. And there's some lovely bits on there. There's a year one exhibition that they've just had. And one of our students, I think it's been posted today, has just been selected for the World Illustration Awards for a mural. So students are doing stuff. That's the key. What I will say to all of you is, if you're interested in coming to the UK, I can't talk for other universities internationally, but the UK, every course will have an Instagram account. Look at the Instagram account, because it's managed by people like me or my boss. And we are there in the studios every day showing you what the students are doing. And that gives you a real understanding and flavor of what we do. And it's exciting. And if an Instagram's boring, don't go to the university, okay? Don't go. If it's boring, you don't like the look of it, don't go. If you like the look of the Instagram, like what people are doing, like the feel of it, then that's it's a really good sign for you guys. Next slide, please. That's just the Instagram page from a long time ago. Next one, please. So some practitioners, probably most of them you've never heard of, but I'll just point out, where is he? Mark Ellaby. So here, third row, he is the lead artist on the Rick and Morty comic, and he was one of our students. He's now come back and done some teaching, and he also works on the Doctor Who comic as well. So I don't know if you know Doctor Who in Vietnam.
It's very famous, you know. We comics, Western comics, manga here. Yeah. Okay. Well, and then there's just lots of like students. Veronica has gone back to Czechoslovakia and works on beer labels and the beer companies, and specializes in that and does some amazing stuff. And Tony Hart is a bit of a joke for UK students, because he's a very old man who was a TV personality in the UK who taught children how to draw on TV. But yeah, anyway, next slide, please. This is what you can do, and a lot more besides, but illustrator, animator, publishing, graphic design, curation, art direction. Don't do teaching and education. It's not worth it. There are better jobs out there, guys. Advertising, animator, artist, design manager, gallery coordinator, landscape artist, printmaker, production, publishing, visual arts. I would say in terms of illustrator, there's editorial, there's documentary, there's comics, there's storyboarding for film, storyboarding for games, there's concepts, there's medical, there's documentary and working and reportage, where you go out and you record things. There's a whole field within illustration itself that we explore. So it's a big field, and then all the others you can do as well as. So there's a lot of opportunities. Illustration students are a more refined version of fine art students. They have the criticality, the problem solving, the visual skills, but they can literally go and work in an industry because they understand how to solve problems and work with a client stroke audience. And that is the key. And that's what we teach, audience and client, or client and audience. Because with that, you will have a career in the visual industries. If you don't understand those two things, you won't have a career. So we start that from day one, literally from day one. Next slide, please. How to prepare a portfolio.
I don't know, will this be useful?
Yeah, we got
yeah.
From your perspective. Yeah.
Okay, so next slide. So I love when I write we love to see, what I really mean is I love to see, okay? Drawing in all of its forms, okay? So pencil, charcoal, graphite, ink, collage is a form of drawing, montage, all of it, we want to see it. Printmaking, dry point, mono printing, screen printing, any printmaking you can do, brilliant. Photography, really important, with your phone, with a DSLR, with an analog camera. 3D mixed media, little sculptures, tiny little things, big things, it's up to you. Moving image, animation, film, doesn't matter. AR, VR, web. But this is the key, I think, for international students, because with the portfolios, and I see at least 30 a week, we don't get to see many mistakes, failures, dead ends, or where you really take risks. For me, that's really important. When I look at an undergraduate portfolio for UCA, I want to see that you've experimented and tried things. I don't care if it fails. What I want to see is that you have the ability, not only in terms of technical, but in terms of your personality, to really have a go at things and take risks. You cannot have innovation if you don't take risks. And it's as simple as we would not be the species we are, and we wouldn't be where we are in the food chain if we didn't have risks and we didn't have innovation in what we do. The very first moment we picked something up to smash something, that was innovation. When we created fire, that was innovation. A big risk, probably lost an eyebrow or two. You know, all of that's innovation, and it's risk taking, and it's really important. Personal work is really important. If you are able to send work, we don't accept it at UCA, but I know other universities do. If you can send physical work to anywhere in the world, it's the best. But obviously you guys are in Vietnam, that's a lot of money. So digital is the best for you guys. But give us an understanding of the physical nature of what you do. So if it's a 3D object, photograph it 3D. If it's got volume or texture, zoom in and show us that texture, that volume, because that's really exciting for people like me. It makes portfolios more exciting. Okay, next slide. Sketchbooks. So photograph your sketchbooks, your journals. We want to see how you think visually, how you think through annotation. So, you know, show us what you're thinking. Next one, please. Maximum of 12 pages or slides. So digital for you guys. So next one, please. 2 or 3 pieces per page or slide is fine. Outcomes. So you could have 11 pages of outcomes and 1 page of experimentation. Or you could have 6 and 6 or 10 and 4. It's up to you what combination you want. We don't mind. But 2 or 3. Noticed how I've spaced it with final pieces. Nothing crosses over on the corners. There's white space. So think of editorial design. Next one, please. What I do not like to see, and it really, really upsets me, that doesn't upset me, but it annoys me, is overlapping artworks. Please don't overlap your work on a slide. You wouldn't do this in an editorial design. You wouldn't do this for a client, so we don't want to see it. So keep the white space and give space around your work, because that helps us judge the value and the quality of it. Next slide. Any questions?
Okay.
Sorry, that's my email address. So if you have any questions, you are more than welcome to email me. I'm very good at getting back to people with email questions, and I will get back to you within 48 hours, I promise. That's a big promise to make, but I promise. And then thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. This is the most informative webinars I have ever hosted with university in the UK. Especially like even within my jobs, I expect to listen to all of these information. Like it's very clear to understand how illustrations students will go through for 3 years and what they're gonna do when they study in UCAs, and about the career path is very clear. I think all the students are satisfied for this webinar. So Artpink have collected all of the questions here. So I will share it, and you can pick up the most interesting questions, or the question that you want to answer to the student and the parents. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Wow. Okay. There's a lot of questions.
Sorry.
Okay. Hi, Tom. Okay. All right. Where am I going from? So, can you share that?
I will share the screen.
Okay.
We have collected in humans. Yeah.
Yeah. So, shall I start with the questions?
Just wait for me. I will share the questions.
Oh, I can see them. I can see the questions. They're in the chat.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. How the emergence. Oh, that's a bit big. Let me just move my. How the emergence of AI affects the employment opportunities of fresh graduates, particularly graphics and design. These two majors, what do they need to learn to increase their competitiveness? Okay, all right. So the first one, AI. No one knows the answer yet. I'm going to be brutally honest. It's really difficult. I think AI is only as good as the person inputting the information. The difference we have with human beings is the way that we understand what others are trying to communicate and how we emphasize or help that communication. AI at the moment cannot make conceptual and contextual leaps. It cannot see the nuances. It replicates from sources. We do more than that. We interpret. And I think the interpretation is what makes us intrinsically human. And that interpretation allows us to then communicate in a unique, interesting, engaging, fun, personal, and human way. I also think materials, craft, experience is really important in that as well. So I think as it stands, we are facing what is the equivalent of fine artists around the turn of the 20th, well, probably earlier, slightly towards the end of the 19th century, with the printing press and photographic reproduction. And that's what we are fighting. So we will change. Like Picasso, he changed the way, and it became less about representation, i.e. looking like something, and more about communicating a sense of something. And I think that's where our challenge is. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for your presentation. You're very welcome. I appreciate it a lot. Because I joined the webinar a bit late, I was wondering what is the one specific difference between fine arts curriculum and illustration. Now, I can answer this because I did my master's in fine art. Okay. And I am an artist. I work between the two. Fine art is usually about your own interests, your own ideas, and communicating what you think the world needs to hear. Illustration is much more about clients, understanding briefs, and communicating what others are trying to say in a visual way. The nuance is, or the slight difference is, with illustration, you can do what fine artists do as well, but fine artists very rarely can do what illustrators do because they don't think like that. So it's always about emphasizing or communicating to briefs through narrative, through sequencing. Fine art tends to either be still images, paintings, sculptures, installations, sometimes moving image, well, actually moving images quite a lot, but they don't do sequence narrative in the same way that illustration can. And they don't handle briefs in the same way. It's much more about them as practitioners with a voice saying, this is the world. And I think illustrators are better at responding to what other people are trying to do and then giving that a visual voice. Yeah?
Yeah, we move to the next questions.
Yeah, that's fine. What software do you use in your work? I use Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, Adobe Aero, Artivive, After Effects. I use a lot. Cinema 4D. That's the software I use. I have also used kind of some motion graphic stuff, a little bit of Blender, and motion capture, but that was a long time ago. Oh, Adobe Premiere, of course, because you can't use After Effects without Premiere. So I use all of that. Can you explain the term visual voice? Yes, the visual voice is what your own visual identity. So having a style, I hate the word style, because the problem with style is that when students hear the word style, they think, oh, it's got to look like, you know, I've got to achieve that quite early. Visual voice is all about you visually representing yourself and saying, this is what, if you employ me, this is the style, that the type of work that I will make, and you're employing me because of that, because you like that. Companies will always take the corners off of it and try and fit it into their bracket, but ultimately it is the way that you work. So when you look at different illustrators, they make work in a different way, and that's what a visual voice is. Style is a very difficult word because style pins you down. Voice is something that can change. Our voices change over time, don't they? And there's something that are outward. Style is usually something inward. So we prefer the term visual voice. Make sense? That's a question that got inputted quickly. I'll go down. I'd like to ask if the university you work for is accepting character designing. Yes, it's not part of my area, but we have a games art school. It's big. We've just received millions of pounds worth of government funding and investment. Yes, concept, character design, that's all part of that if you're interested in games. In terms of illustration, we do character design, but in terms of the stories that you're trying to tell. So we don't look at just character design. We look at your story, look at your characters, and then help you to refine your characters within your story. So how is illustration distinct from fine art? I've said that. With graphics, it's less about layout and type. It's more about image. That's what we deal with. Graphic designers will use our images to make their design look better. It's as simple as that. What techniques and resources did you use to design your last few pieces? Oh, that's a really good question. I used augmented reality and weirdly pizza boxes that I find on the street. So I go and I find discarded pizza boxes and I stick augmented reality over the top, little illustrations. I work on the side of the road doing it, and then I upload it to Artifive, and then people can come along and scan it, and then an animation stroke illustration appears, and it only lasts for as long as the street council leave the pizza box on the floor, which is only a few hours. So I'm interested in this idea of the blurring between the everyday object, stuff that isn't art, and stuff that is illustration or art design. So I'm interested in those what we call lo-fi, hi-fi. Hi-fi being art, lo-fi being rubbish that people just leave. I hope that makes sense. What type of design work do you enjoy the most, print or digital? Why? Well, that's a really difficult question. I think I love print because I love the smell of print. I know it's really weird, but when you have a print that isn't behind a frame, it still smells of the inks. And that takes me back to being 20 at university. But I love what you can do with digital, the world of digital. And I mean good digital. I don't mean just, you know, bog standard every day that everyone's doing. I mean like digital that's interactive, digital that's engaging, digital that is immersive. That's what I'm really excited by. This idea that, you know, you can put your hand on a wall and change an image. You can walk into a space and feel 1,000 different things in a moment because of what's around you. That's where I think the digital is really exciting. What are some ways you can add perspective to an image? Are you talking technical perspective? If you want to do that, that's vanishing lines, worm, bird's eye. So worm view, looking up, bird looking down. There's a really great trick that if you put a pin in a piece of paper or just outside of your piece of paper and put some string on it, you can get your disappearing vanishing lines by just pulling the string out. There's loads of YouTube tutorials on it. You'll find it. It's really simple. But perspective, I think the other thing, if you are creating books and narratives, don't think just about perspective, think about relationships and scale. So for instance, if you look at comics, they emulate film and animation. You have zoomed in shots, you have far away shots, you have dynamic shots, lines, you have orientation spun around. So you're taking your viewer literally on this journey of kind of imagery. How much time do you take to design an illustration? All depends on what I'm doing it and who I'm doing it for, but most importantly, how much money I'm being paid. So if I'm being paid £100, it's not even half a day. If I'm being paid £250, it's a day. What you've got to remember is, and it's really funny, there's a great anecdote about Pablo Picasso, who was sat in a cafe and a woman came up to him and gave him a napkin and a pen and said, could you draw on this napkin for me? And he drew on it and he said to the woman, right, that'll be £10,000 or something like that. And she was like, but it's only a 5-minute drawing. He was like, but madam, what is a 5-minute drawing to you is 40 years worth of a practice to me. And if it only takes 5 minutes, then you should do it yourself. So you have to think about that. You're not just earning that amount in the moment, you're earning what you've been working to. So a standard day rate in the UK for an illustrator is about £250 for a day, based on 7 hours. Who influences you to follow an illustration career? Initially, it was fine art, and then I looked at albums, music, vinyl records, and I just looked at the illustrations and thought, this is cool. Why am I making fine art? I want to draw stuff like this. But also kind of animations, Ren and Stimpy, Beavis and Butthead from the 1990s. None of that you'll probably know. And Peter Blake, who is an artist who I selected my work for an exhibition. And I showed him my work and he's like, you should go into illustration, not fine art. And I was like, okay, I'll do that then. That sounds great. I'll do that. So Peter Blake is one of my heroes. How do you find budget or time limitations to your projects? I think I just answered that with the money. Money. If I'm doing projects for myself, I'll spend as much time as I want. I have 2 teenage children, a partner and a dog. So I've got a 17-year-old son and a 14-year-old son. So obviously they take a bit of time. I need to invest in them. And my dog takes a lot of time because he's old. So you kind of have to balance off what you're doing in your life. And then I have my job and I am full-time. So I realistically probably get about 6 hours a week to make work personally, because I work on my commute into work. What subjects do the illustrations majors study? Oh, crikey. Everything. You will do narrative, you'll do storytelling, you'll do one-off illustration, editorial, moving image, 3D. You'll do social, political, environmental. You'll do hundreds of things, and they change. Sometimes we'll do a project, and the next day someone says, "Oh, we've got this. Do you want to do it?" And we're like, "Yeah." So we stop the project midway, throw another project in just to mess around with you, and go back to the other project. So it's very, very varied. What internships opportunity can we have? Internships, well, they're a bit more difficult. I'm not 100% sure how that works for international students. You'd have to talk to the international office about that and the visa office. But in terms of we run competitions with companies, because international students can't earn, or certain international students can't earn a freelance rate. You can't claim as a freelancer. You can be employed, but you can't earn as a freelancer. So with companies, we do things where it's you get vouchers or art materials, so that all students can take part. But we try and give you real life briefs, which are probably better than an internship, to be honest, because in an internship, you're just going to be asked to make tea and sweep up. So we give you actual client experience. What will we need to prepare if we enroll in the illustration industry or course? Because you don't enroll in this industry. I know it might be a language thing, but if it's the industry, what do you need to prepare? Be the best you can be at what you do. Simple as that. Know your craft, know it well, be confident. Don't worry about things not going your way and getting rejected. It's part of life. That's what we do. Be really, really, really ambitious, but also, and this is the most practical thing I can ever tell anybody, if you draw 7 days a week for more than an hour a day, you need to work vertically, because you will destroy all the muscles down the back of your shoulder and you'll develop carpal tunnel, and then your career's over. It's like being a sports person and not stretching or not wearing shin pads or a bike helmet. And I know it sounds really boring. You're like, why is this guy talking about working vertically? But I have seen so many careers wrecked at the age of 24, 25, where their shoulder ligaments have been destroyed because they've been hunched over drawing like that. You have to be upright. Okay.
That's why Artpink students have to do exercise during the course in Artpink, and they make sure they have the good physical conditions before they go study abroad. Yeah, I think that's
Brilliant.
quite for the UCA to consider as a good, candidate.
Yeah, totally. Good. Was there any of could you name some famous students or professionals in your school or professors? Famous is an interesting word. Famous doesn't always mean good. More often than not, famous just means famous. There's lots. You can, oh gosh, all that list, they're famous within the illustration world. And I think, but the best tutors are tutors that have good careers, but are amazing educators. So when I did my postgraduate, I didn't know who the tutors were, but they were the best tutors in the world at what they were doing, and they were. And I learned a very valuable lesson. Don't chase the stars and the names, chase the quality, because that's the most important thing. But there are lots of people. Oh gosh, Tony Hart, Mark Ellaby's really famous. He works for, massive comics. It's kind of gone out of my head. It's in the alumni list. But beyond illustration, Tracy Emin, who's won the Turner Prize, which is a big art prize, Zandra Rhodes. UCA has had a lot of people go through it and do amazing things. And then other people who quietly get on with it, but have amazing careers, but probably don't have the name, but equally as very happy and very successful. So it's about finding what your success is, I think, and what success is for you as an individual. Don't listen to other people. Find your own success, find your own space.
Yeah, I think we share the philosophy in education and guide students to the when they want to go into the art career. And I hope to see you someday in Hanoi when you can directly meet our community. Yeah, we have a lot of students. They are very potential and they hunger to, you can, based on the questions they have met, they really care about this career, these majors, and they just need to see the real professional community, the real picture when they study abroad, just like you. So thank you, Tom, for your knowledge, for your sharing. It's wonderful and valuable for not only for our students and parents, but even for us. I want to build up the partnership to more detail and have the students in Vietnam to get the bright futures, and they can come back to have the arts community in Vietnam. We the art history in Vietnam is just very young, just 30 years old since we have the eras, and we have a lot of things to develop in here. So I hope UCA will be our, strategic partner in the future. Thank you.
Me too. I love the questions, and maybe someday I can get out to Vietnam and come and see you guys. That would be amazing.
Remember to bring your sons.
Yes, I will. He will be on the plane before me. So but yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody that was here as well, and thank you for the amazing questions. I'm really impressed. They're the best questions I've ever had on a webinar. So I am humbled by your kind of passion and knowledge and directness. So that's what I want to see in students. So if you want to come to us, any questions, email me. I will always answer. You can come straight to me. And if you want me to come back and do another talk about something else, or even just to look at some portfolios online, I'm absolutely happy to do that. So that's maybe something we can set up at a later date. Yeah,
thank you. So I will have some few sentences for our audience today. Okay, cảm ơn quý phụ huynh và các học viên đã dành thời gian vào buổi cuối tuần tới buổi webinar số 5 của Học viện Mỹ thuật Artpink. Artpink rất là vui khi mà được tới cái buổi webinar thứ 5 này, vì đây là một chuỗi sự kiện đã thể hiện được là những cố gắng và nỗ lực của học viện trong việc là kết nối học viên và phụ huynh đối với những cái trường nghệ thuật hàng đầu thế giới. Không chỉ là với tư cách là phụ huynh là nhà đầu tư và các bạn học viên là tiềm năng, mà chúng tôi muốn là một cầu nối đây không chỉ mang về tính chất là đưa học sinh sang, mà còn là đồng hành với các bạn trong cả đời sống và cả chặng đường thực hành ngày sau này. Và hy vọng là những cái buổi kết nối như thế này và quý vị có thể được trực tiếp lắng nghe nghe trường chia sẻ về những triết lý giáo dục cũng như các hoạt động trực tiếp của trường và được nói chuyện trực tiếp với những người đứng đầu ở trường, thì quý vị sẽ có thêm nhiều góc nhìn trong cái việc là đồng hành cùng học viện trong việc là xây dựng một chiến lược đầu tư cho con mình đi vào hành trình tương lai. Một lần nữa xin cảm ơn quý vị phụ huynh và các học viên đã dành thời gian cho buổi tối hôm nay. Thank you so much again. It's a pleasure to having you in this webinar. Hope to see you someday. Yeah, thank you. Xin chúc mọi người một tối hoan hỉ. Cảm ơn mọi người.